we're going to put in an invisible zipper. I've made a mock-up bodice here, and I made sure that there was a waistline here because there's many times invisible zippers are in dresses, and it's just really good application to practice lining up this intersection where the bodice meets the skirt. So I have also a facing that you would normally also run into. I stitched my skirt closed like a normal center back seam. So, and I stopped where the length of my zipper, where that length would be appropriate to stop. So if you see, this is the stop on my zipper, the top of my zipper. It would be ideal to actually leave just a little bit of space so that we can have a hook and eye. So it's more going to be like a ½ inch from the top when we're actually done with it. So I kind of have that set up and ready to go. So I'm going to set that aside. And this is an invisible zipper. This is actually the right side of the zipper. And you can't see any coils or teeth on the right side. But here's the zipper pull. And invisible zippers usually have this longer, narrow zipper pull to make it more discreet when it's in the seam. And then on the back side, the wrong side of the zipper, is where you'll see the zipper teeth and the zipper coils. And that's kind of what that looks like. So the first thing we have to do after we decide how long of a zipper we need is we're going to unzip it, and we're going to turn it to the wrong side. And then we need to take our iron and roll these coils slightly open. So you'll see that change in the zipper twill tape there. That line is where we're going to be stitching close to. So we're just going to kind of, it doesn't take a lot of heat with your iron, so you don't need to spend a lot of time there with it, but you do kind of want to roll the coils down and then kind of push the zipper tape back. So that kind of opens that up a little bit. And that actually really makes the zipper process a lot easier. Just kind of open that up. So you can see the difference between the side that I pressed and the side that I did not press yet. You just want these zipper teeth, these coils, to roll more open. So that we're going to do the same thing with these ones. We're going to just press them slightly open. Again, you don't want to spend too much time. Zippers are meant to be able to handle a little bit of heat with the drying process and the ironing and application process, but you don't want to just sit there with your iron. You really can melt those coils, and then you have to get a new zipper. Okay, so that's what it looks like for now. Okay, so just as a reminder, this is the right side. Whoops, this is the right side of our zipper right here. So then I am going to have my bodice here, my back of my dress that I'm making, and I'm going to think inside out and backwards. So if this is the right side of my zipper, I need it to end up like this in my, okay. So if this is the right side of my zipper, I need it to end up like this in my garment, so that when I have the right side of my garment, this is where the zipper is. The zipper pull is in the correct side. Okay, so then how we do that is we find the seam allowance. Here is the turn of our facing. We're going to line up the tape right about the edge of the zipper tape with the edge of the finished edge of the facing. And that's where we're going to start pinning. I like to put a pin in crosswise so that my zipper doesn't shift. Okay, and since this has this seam at the waist, I want to actually mark where that is on my zipper. So I'm going to close it quickly after I've marked the top placement. And I'm going to walk my zipper tape down here to this. And where that seam is where I'm going to just put a mark on my zipper. And you're just going to make that mark the same on the other side so that you can line it up both times. Now, if you spend a lot of time with your zipper closed, you might have to re-iron that coil open. So just mark it and then open it back up. Okay, so now I'm going to pin along the side here. I really don't do a lot of pinning when I put in zippers, but I do want to make sure that this mark that I marked before, where that seam is going to be lined up on the seam. So I'm going to put another pin perpendicular to my zipper right there in that seam. Now, when we get down here with our zipper, we're actually going to be passing this seam where we stopped and we reversed our seam. So we're actually going to want to make sure that our zipper coils are next to this folded edge where our fold is. So we got that fold by, I'll show you real quick here. So I did the seam in my center back, and then I continued visually that seam allowance all the way up and pressed it. Something else you could do, if you don't want to visually do that, is when you reverse after your regular stitches, these are like a stitch length of 2.5, and then you reverse and stop, and then this is where your zipper is going to begin. So you could keep your needle in the fabric here as you're doing this seam, and then extend your stitch length to like a 5, and then just finish closing this. And then that would continue that, and you would be able to press that seam open. It would be closed with a basting stitch, and then you could line up your zipper and take out that basting stitch when you were done, but then these stitches would be secure as they were before. So that's how I got that fold. So we're going to go to the sewing machine now, put our presser foot on, and we're going to be stitching. Our needle is going to travel right next to this change in the zipper tape weave. And it seems like we're incredibly close to the coils, which we are, but once our needle stitches down there, our coils are actually going to curl back the way they were before we ironed it, and that's exactly where we want our stitches. So this line right here. So I'm going to change my all-purpose presser foot to my zipper foot. And then I'm going to move my needle off to the left all the way. Now, if you're not sure that you like the placement of your zipper, you could baste it in first in the same manner that we're going to be stitching it in. I would just use a really long stitch. I feel pretty confident about our zipper placement, so I'm just going to stitch it with a regular stitch. So we're going to line the edge of our presser foot here with this crease right here that we have in the zipper tape. And that's going to force our needle to stay in that line that I showed you before. But you want to keep the coils of your zipper lined up with this crease right here where you had your seam allowance, where you marked that. So the edge of your fabric might not be the edge of your zipper. It's actually going to be closer to leaving a little space. The coils of your zipper, though, should be lined up with this crease that you made when you pressed that seam flat. So the coils will be lined up with this crease. That might mean that you'll see some of the seam allowance on this side, and that's absolutely what it should look like. Something else I like to do before I start is just take the top edge of my zipper tape and give it a little turn, like a 90-degree angle, and then it will be in the seam allowance. I need my coils lined up with my fold here. Don't forget to reverse. You don't need to hold the coils out of the way, but I'm hoping that you can see better if I do that. And then we're going to make sure that we're lining our coils up with this fold right here. Okay, here's where my seam ends, and here's where my zipper stop is going to be. However, I need to be able to get down here without working around my zipper stop. So this is where you kind of, on a regular zipper, you would just push the zipper stop out of the way. But if you do that, you lose the placement of your needle in that coil. So you kind of have to just go slow and get as close as you can. So now I have to close my zipper. There we go. Okay. So now you can see that I really can't get as close as I was before with my needles, so I just have to do my best. But I still want to keep these coils lined up with the edge of my fold. Now it's my seam. And then you just kind of, you don't want to go clear to the end of the zipper tape. Let's see what it looks like on this side. See, once you get near the zipper pull, you sort of have to work away from the zipper teeth, and it ends up being like that. So there's some things we can do. A lot of times I like to put my zipper in first and then do my seam, and that might be what we end up doing. See, so we have that. Although we got pretty close to our zipper coils when we were stitching, once we close it, there's enough clearance in that for our zipper to move up and down. And honestly, I feel, yeah, I think that's good. So there's enough room for our zipper pull. I feel like I want to go a little bit closer. I'm not going to lie. I feel like let's move closer to our zipper coils there. Just right here, it looks like it could be closer. So I kind of tip my zipper teeth over a little bit, and then I just kind of start back again and kind of just go a little bit closer to my coils if I can. Once I got down here, it was closer and it was nicer, but I feel like I didn't like how that gap was before. Let's see if we can get closer here without having to move our zipper pull. It's going to be tight. Yeah, that's all the closer we can get. But I do think up here, we got closer, and it's going to be a nicer finish on the edge of our zipper. So our zipper teeth have enough room to work with the zipper pull, and we don't have a big gap. See, when I kind of pull a little bit here, there's no extra fabric between my fabric and my zipper teeth, because when I let go, then that's gonna curl back in with the zipper teeth, and that's perfect. That's what we want. So now we're going to do the other side, unzip. And I like to start actually with my zipper placement on the second side by pinning that seam location. That way I know that is lined up and accurate. I'm actually going to pin it and then check it before. So I'm going to pin it this way, kind of try and keep it out of the way of the slider. And then I'm going to zip it closed and make sure that that seam lines up perfectly across. Show you a little bit better here. So if we stitch that there, then it will be lined up when it's done. So we're going to start by working with that pin, and then we'll work our way to the top of the zipper and work our way to the bottom. So we're going to make this pin now a perpendicular pin, like I like to do when I'm working with seams. That way it can't shift at all away from where we want it. Also, another thing, you want to make sure that your seam is going up into the bodice for the skirt part, because then you would have lining or something on this side. It just lays nicer if it's that way. So, okay, follow the crease that we made for our seam pressing and make our zipper coils line up near that. And then we're going to take our tape and make a right angle into the seam allowance there. And another one that we're going to double check is this top. And then ideally, if I lined this up correctly at the top of the neckline, when my facing is folded like it should be in the end, the zipper should line up at this right angle here. And then you would put your hook and eye and it would be lined up much better. But you don't want it to be like this, for example, because then that shows on the center back of your neck, and that's really obvious that you didn't get your zipper lined up. So we're going to go back and unzip and pin correctly. Now that we know our two places that we are concerned about are lined up. So now I always like to do directional sewing when I do zippers. So if I start at the top on one side and work my way down, I like to start at the top on the other side and work my way down. I'm going to be traveling in this line here, and we still want to have the edge of our presser foot on the edge of our coils, but we're going to have to move our needle over to the right hand side. And then we'll put our presser foot down. Make sure our needle is down before we start, or we're going to get a bird's nest on the back, and we don't like that. It adds more bulk. Needle down into the fabric before you start, and then hit reverse. It's a little bit thick, so just be gentle and go slow. And then we're going to stay the edge of our presser foot on the edge of our coils. And you're not concerned about this distance being perfect, you're concerned about the coils lining up on that crease that you made when you pressed open your seam allowance. Make sure that the seam stays up when you go over. Then I remove the pin after I've gone through that seam, but if you remove it before, you could really shift that alignment that you made. There's my crease. Okay. trim our tails. I think we're going to have to still go closer to our zipper teeth at the bottom. There's a trick we can do though, so ideally I like to put the zipper in first and then meet the seam at the bottom, but this is a pretty typical situation, so I wanted to show you what's typical, especially if you're altering and you have to take out the zipper and move it, then you don't have the opportunity to do the seam second. And now we learn whether the things stayed lined up when we needed them. Okay, so that waist seam lined up nicely. And here is our neckline. Not too bad. And then we'll put a hook and eye on the top there, and that's a pretty good job. So I like to finish these off in a couple of ways. So we have our facing here. I like to fold our facing down like this, just straight down. And basically, you're going to sandwich your zipper inside your facing. And this top part here, you want to maintain this fold of your neckline, and see how that's a nice fold where the front is by itself and then the facing is on the other side. You want to maintain that fold. You're just doing the inversion of that fold. And this should just go straight down your seam here. These edges should line up. And then you just put a little pin. Here's my zipper coil. So I like to just kind of wrap my pin around my zipper coil. And then I turn it over so I can see the stitches that I did when I put in my zipper. So there's my stitches. And I'm just going to, I need to move my needle off to the left again. And I just start at the top. And you can either make a mark with your tailor's chalk to continue that line, or you can do a visual continuation. And I just start at the top. And go straight down. And you just want to merge into that same stitching that you had before. And then you just kind of reverse to secure it. Okay. And then you can take out your pin. And then you would normally trim your corner. So we're going to just take the smallest trim out of this corner, near my stitches, but not too near. Then all you do is you take this corner and you just push it inside, and then you've got a nice finished edge of your facing, and there's your invisible zipper. If this was a bigger line, like maybe it was a lining even, I would understitch this down. I think I'm going to understitch it right here just to keep it out of the way of the zipper teeth, but you don't want to top stitch through and create stitches on that side. So I'm just going to hold it off to the side here, grab my seam allowance from my bodice and my zipper and the seam allowance from my facing. You don't want to turn it completely right side out, inside out again, because you need that lined up, and you're going to sew right here on this side. So you kind of hold those together. You can pin them. And then you are going to stitch right here next to your facing. Now here's the thing. If you go up too high into this corner, you're going to probably accidentally pull some of the front of the bodice into your needle, and you don't really want stitches showing. So you're just going to go up as far as you can without having to have stitches show. You really can't go the entire way up to the corner. See, I don't have stitches showing on this side. There's my understitching. And then I have to trim my tails on this side because I went through the seam allowances. And that will keep your zipper tape tails out of the way. That stop is kind of rough, and it's okay to have it inside, not touching your skin. And then it's a nice clean finish. And this edge is going to stay out of the way of getting stuck in the teeth as you use the zipper. So that's kind of how you finish that edge, the top of your zipper. And we'll do that with the other side now. So maintain, just invert that fold, and then your edges should line up perfectly here. Here's our stitches. I like to stitch directionally, especially when we have to have it lined up so perfectly from one side to the other. So we are going to maintain that direction with our stitching, and therefore we need to move our needle to the right now. I want to overlap just a little bit more here, so I'm going to go a little further down. And just a tiniest little corner clip. Then I'm going to understitch my layers here. So I don't want this layer in my understitching. This is the outside of my garment. It's the outside. But I want this layer and these seam allowances together. So I'm going to go as far as I can into the corner here. Move my needle off to the left. And that's the top of our invisible zipper. Oops. Top of our neckline. I would probably poke out this corner just a little bit more with like a knitting needle or something to make that a little bit more of a right angle there. I just think it would look nicer. The fabric's in there, I just didn't pull it out like I should have. And then down here where this is getting wonky, I'm going to actually put my fabric together. And I want to kind of pinch it really close to my zipper. And I'm going to just work right here next to it and then go down. So flip it over here. Kind of pull it out of the way. So I'm going to move my needle over to the right so I can be as close to those zipper coils as I can. So you kind of pull this off to the side, and then also these seam allowances, you kind of pull them together as one. And then I want my zipper as close to my needle as I can. So it's almost like stitching in the ditch, but you're not working in the ditch like between a seam in that sense. You just want to get your needle as close as possible to those zipper coils, and then just carefully work. And you do want to reverse as you go when you start and finish. You don't want those stitches to come out as the zipper is being used. Okay, so I'm pulling over my seam allowance, and I want my needle to be right there. So you're pulling over, keeping that well out of the way. And then you're just merging into this current seam that you wanted it to be in the original time. If you can't put the zipper in, then put the seam in. And if this doesn't work as well as you hoped, it's okay to do a couple of hand stitches right there to secure it and make it blend nicely. It's not the best case scenario, but it really is okay to do. I think that looks pretty good, especially after I press it. This will disappear. So that's an invisible zipper.